people have not felt too good about these styles of Chinese. And it's actually a good thing to do. Criticisms. This is from Xu Qiubai, who said, this kind of Chinese, Europeanized Chinese, he did mention 欧化汉语, when recited aloud, is just extremely ugly Chinese without a trace of beauty.
I'm missed the opening remarks. Is this just relating to the study of how Chinese is studied by students, like being Europeanized, or actual students being in Europe or the Western world and how that influences their speech?
Actual native speakers producing writers. Yeah, and this happened especially in the turn of the last century when Chinese being modernized. The whole process is happening, and what we call modern standard Chinese is it does not have a long history. It's just been established in the past couple decades, actually. Yeah.
By Europeanized, you're focusing on syntactic, and syntax not just syntactic or morphological and.
It's everything. But I'll get to what I'm focusing on, right? As you can see in that example, there's a lot of things that's packed there. And you can actually unpack it by looking at different features of Europeanized Chinese. Okay, so some quotes about how people feel about them. Okay, this is saying that this is ugly Chinese. Yeah. Yu Guangzhong, another person that's important in criticizing European or Westernized Chinese. He mostly said Westernized Chinese. He said Western Chinese is abnormal, 病态, and it's also 恶性西化. Yeah, it's malicious. Bad, yeah. Something that we should do without and be afraid of. Yeah, he's promoting that we should really stay away from these kind of Chinese. Yeah. More recently in Taiwan, this kind of Chinese has been referred to as language cancer, 语言癌症. Yeah, 恶性西化 again here, and this is about normalization in Chinese. Yeah, so if you look at the language hygiene discourse about language as the health of language and purity, then you see a lot of examples and how people talk about these as having a language cancer or linguistic cancer cell, and you should stay away from these. Yeah. Examples right here. I'm going to have you show you a table of what people have discussed about Europeanized Chinese. So here's a table that I came up with that shows you the features of Europeanized Chinese that have been in the literature from Yu Guangzhong, who talked about or criticized these, give examples of how this was filtered through translations. And Kubler also listed from a linguistic perspective, he didn't really criticize them. Yeah? Linguists tend not to criticize Westernized Chinese. Just like what I'm showing you what's happening. Yeah? Obviously, Yu Guangzhong is not one of them. Yeah. Okay. So what's happening is there are particular aspects of the language that people pay attention to and agree on that they consider as important features of Europeanized Chinese. There's lexical features, and there's also a lot intense or increased use of morphology, like suffixes, pronouns, passives. People agree that too much passive or long passive sentences in Europeanized Chinese. And in particular, I'm going to focus on what I have been really interested in the past decade, noun phrases and rhetoric clauses. Yeah? Rhetoric clauses with the, and people refer to it as different things. There's rhetoric clauses, there's also adjectival clauses, yeah? Noun phrases basically, yeah? People agree that there's something wrong with these noun phrases, yeah, that make them Europeanized, okay? So you don't want to propose that everybody stay away from learning English or maybe reading translated literature, yeah? We want to really read Chinese classics to regain and come back to real, authentic Chinese. So basically, he was saying, remember he's not a linguist, so I'm not quoting him saying that. And saying that the reason why we have Westernized Chinese could have been that people read English or learn English, they think in English and they write in English in Chinese, or they read too much translated work. And there's direct influence and indirect influence over there. Okay? And so one is translational Chinese, right? On the one hand, we talk about language that is not translated and that have features that you think of as being non-authentic. Now, there's a study on translational Chinese. It's a corporate study that talks about the features like higher proportion of short passages, where use of function words, preference of longer words and low frequency words, basically they're not from Chinese, right? And use of the, which is related to what I'm looking at. Noun phrases, okay? And another quote, features Europeanized Chinese are usually characterized as having lengthy and complicated modifiers. So I'm going to talk about why there's lengthy and complicated modifiers and why people don't like these lengthy and complicated modifiers. Okay? So the questions that I'm asking over here is, what underlies the aesthetic stigma for long modifiers? And are all modifiers equally Westernized? Like, yeah. And why are complex noun phrases and modifiers associated with the West? Yeah. Okay, let me just give you this and just talk about the two things. I think typological differences between the two languages, Chinese on the one hand and English on the other, plays an important role in this conflict when the two languages come in contact. And it's important to take into consideration processing how people are able to handle these cross-linguistic differences or typological differences. Yeah. On the one hand, you can see that this kind of language or the Westernized Chinese is bad, but on the other hand, it's actually grammatical. It is not grammatically wrong. So why do people feel bad about that, right? Then that has to do with processing. Okay? So let me talk about this hypothesis called head-driven constituent complexity hypothesis, which I proposed and started working on in 2011 in the previous time that I was in NACO. Over there, I talked about the differences that's related to the position of the head. Yeah, so different head positions may use the same processing strategies. The later the head is encountered, the greater the temporary uncertainty there is in process, and therefore the harder the processing may be. Yeah, and English is, noun phrases has the head in the initial position followed by the red process, right, which is the opposite mirroring of Chinese, where you have the modifiers before the head. Now, so the prediction of this hypothesis is that head final structures are overall harder than head initial structures to read, to process, and that head final phrases tend to be shorter than head initial phrases. So you're comparing head initial phrases and head final phrases. Head final phrases tend to involve more uncertainty and cost on working memory, and we want to reduce that load. Okay. So comparing Chinese and English, Chinese noun phrases are head final, English noun phrases with red process are head initial. So Chinese noun phrases tend to be less complex than English noun phrases, and Chinese native speakers in general would prefer short and less complex noun phrases. And in that,
by complexity, you
yes.
mean the number of words,
yes,
or
good
the structure,
question.
or what?
Yeah, so let me show you. In that presentation a couple of years ago, this is what I looked at. Right? I compared texts that are originally written in English, translated to Chinese, and texts that are written in Chinese, translated to English, and look at in that study, I looked at number of words. So that's the length, basically. And so this is the differences, and you see that authentic Chinese has shorter CPs or red process, and translational Chinese have longer, yeah. And then authentic English have longer noun phrases, and when it's look at English translated from Chinese, they tend to have shorter. And take it to be the effect of the first language or source language onto the translated word. Yeah. So this is the effective translation and also the typology, right? The source language has a certain force to, like Chinese want short noun phrases, and you see that in English translations as well. English has longer noun phrases, and you see that in translation from Chinese as well. Yeah. Okay. So, but at that time, I was not able to look at other parts of speech, and I didn't really look into much more data and also the structure. So today I will present to you an extended work on this, looking not just at noun phrases. Since you look at head final structures in Chinese, there's actually two of them, important ones. Noun phrases would have the modifiers before the head. Noun and verb phrases could also have the modifiers before the head. Basically, similar relationship, an adjunct and head relation. Over here, an adjunct goes before the head in Chinese. Yeah, 在家吃饭, for example. Yeah. So I want to know if the same thing would be observed in two kinds of structures and use different kinds of ways of calculating length and complexity. Okay, so these are the structures I have looked at. Noun phrases with the noun phrases. This is from sentences that we found, we collected and parsed using the pen parser, tree bank parser. And you got the noun, head noun in the end, and this is the CP, and this is the structure that I was looking at. And we look at the complexity of the CP. Yeah. And we'll be looking at the length in terms of characters, number of words, and structurally, number of XP nodes. So structural nodes. Presumably, you have more complex structures, you will have more hierarchy and layers, and you will have more greater number of structural nodes. Okay? So a step beyond this to look at both syllable, number, and also structural nodes. Okay, so that was the noun phrase with read process in Chinese, and here's a noun phrase with another kind of modifier that's not clausal, like 一个学期的隔离. Yeah. This in the country bank is called DMP. Yeah. So you have a modifier that's not clausal, and you can have adjectival modifiers under this category as well. Yeah. Shorter than the clausal. Because with the clausal type, you have an IP here. Okay. So another kind of noun phrase I looked at. And then we move on to verb phrases. Verb phrases that are headed by verbs at the end. So head final. And the modifier could be a prepositional phrase like 向妻子道歉,向妻子对谁. Yeah. And or a head final LCP, head final modifier, 1992年12月至1993年初. This is actually the wrong part, I think. Yeah. So you actually have this kind of phrases as well. You have the head at the final position. Okay. Okay. So the method that I have used is to use those, look at those structures and compare the authentic Chinese with translated Chinese. Yeah. So collect the different texts, parse it, and then count the notes and see if they're different. Okay. So here are the texts. Today I'll focus on this part, on the Chinese part, and the reason of using this is because they also have the other translated parallel part, so we can look at sentence by sentence how they appear in the other language. Yeah. So authentic Chinese, I'm using Taiwan Panorama, which has the Chinese versions and also the English translations. Yeah. And then we also with translated Chinese, I'm looking at New York Times English, which is translated into Chinese from 纽约时报中文网. Okay, so this is translated to this, authentic English translated to Chinese. Okay, so these are the two kinds of Chinese that we're looking at. And we're going to compare through these different structures, NP over CP, NP over DNP, shorter ones without clause, and VP over PP or LCP. Yeah, so basically VPs. And the three metrics I will show you: number of syllables, number of words and number of XPs, right? So this is purely length then, number of characters, and then number of words, terminal nodes, which is a bit more conceptual. Yeah, if we take words as the conceptual unit, and then number of XPs would be even taking into consideration syntax. Okay, and we're gonna go over each one. I will first present to you frequency of occurrences, just to look at whether there are preferences of using these in the different kinds of Chinese or not, and then we look into those complexity-related metrics. Okay, in terms of frequency, actually, there's really not much difference. There's about as many noun phrases over clauses. Well, here's really comparable, and here it's actually different by the direction that we actually do not expect, right? So authentic Chinese actually have more noun phrases that has causal modifiers. And then BPs with PPs, actually there are more of those in authentic Chinese than the translated Chinese that I looked at. So the frequency-wise, this is really not supporting the hypothesis, right? People use it, they don't avoid using it. So that's not a problem. So if there's Europeanization that's being noticed, it's not to be found in frequent use of these modifiers before the heads. They're pretty standard. I think this is similar to say their own criticism on many of the features of Europeanization. These were there in Chinese anyways. It's just whether people are using it or not. Okay. So how about the complexity over here? I'm looking at the noun phrases over CPs and looking at CPs. Yeah. So at CP level, so the relative process basically, you see that authentic, so translated Chinese are longer in terms of syllables, characters, and in terms of words. They're also more complex in terms of XP nodes. Yeah, all these significantly different. Okay, so all three metrics show that yes, translational Chinese is more complex. They have more complex CPs than the authentic Chinese. It is a valid observation. How about those non-clausal modifiers before the heads in a noun phrase, like negotiate suitability? Yeah, there's also more longer modifiers in terms of number of syllables, but not in terms of number of words conceptually. But with the structural way of looking at the complexity, you still involve greater structural complexity in the translational Chinese than in authentic Chinese. So it works, but conceptually, if you just count how many conceptual units like words, then there's no difference. Okay? So it's worth thinking about why, right? But this is the observation at this point. Okay. Now, verb phrases didn't work. So basically, this is not showing that within the verb phrase domain, there's difference between translated Chinese and authentic Chinese. Comparable. Yeah. Okay. So the modifiers are really different. If we just look at verb phrases that have final, that have pre-head modifiers. So here's the finding in terms of frequencies. There's no difference. They're comparable, and we notice that noun phrases and verb phrases are different. If I just focus on head modifier relations, noun phrases and verb phrases are behaving differently in Chinese, though. Yeah, so it hasn't been able to show the extension that I was expecting to show. Yeah. And within the complex noun phrases, yeah, so let's just forget verb phrases, it doesn't work for verb phrases. Within noun phrases, authentic Chinese and translated Chinese are best distinguished by the complexity of embedded CP and also complexity in terms of like phonological length, informational weight, and structural complexity. In particular, I think structural complexity and also phonological length it shows the differences between authentic Chinese and translational Chinese. So it's a pretty good direction to look at if we want to talk about the structural feature of Europeanized Chinese in terms of flaws or embeddings in noun phrases. Okay. Finally, let me wrap up by connecting this maybe with how people feel about it. Okay, so let's just talk about noun phrases, because it works for noun phrases. Divide noun phrases into simple kind and complex kind, and this is authentic, taken to be authentic, and this is taken to be translational. Yeah, and basically because it connected with the head-driven constituency hypothesis, people find it difficult, yeah, to process this typologically, grammatical, because the head precedes follows the modifier. You don't want long complex modifiers. So this is translational. People feel different about it, and Westernized, and then vicious because they don't like it. They cannot process it. Yeah, abnormal. Yeah, and linguistic incompetence, not because the person who produced this was incompetent, but because they aren't able to process these. Okay, and I've looked at 3 ways to think about this complexity: phonological length, informational weight, and structural complexity. And hopefully show you that these are ways to unpack the so-called lengthier modifier in Europeanized or Westernized